Hi, today I want to show you how you can connect Xano with Nordcraft and how you can create this native integration that they have. It's super simple, and the wonderful thing about Nordcraft is it gives you a visual way to build your web applications. And usually most people are using Supabase with Nordcraft, but the downside of using Supabase is it's not visual. The only visual thing is your database. If you want to build APIs, if you want to build cron jobs, you have to use custom code for that. So why should we use a visual tool to build our front end and then hard code, write code on our backend? There's a more dynamic approach out there, and that is using Xano, which allows you to drag and drop your backend together. Now, I know how it sounds. It sounds like it's going to be limited, like Zapier, but the beautiful thing about Xano is it's computational complete, meaning everything that you can do in code, you can do in Xano. And Xano can also build those APIs for you with AI, and then you get those blocks that you can rearrange and reorder and add new blocks in between to make it work amazing. So you can have human interception to AI generation without having to go through code. You can also run code and connect it with millions and millions of NPM packages. So there are no limits, there are only benefits when using Xano. So exactly for that reason, and they just dropped their price significantly, I want to show you how you can connect Nordcraft with Xano to get you started onto the right side. So let's get right started with that. So right now, as you can see, I already have a project in Nordcraft, and now what we need to do is we need to set up our Xano instance. So inside of Xano, we want to create a database. Let me show you how you can do that. You can just click on database to create a new database. And oh, there you go, it's loading. Perfect. Let's add a new table. Let's go to enter data manually. Now in this one, I'm just going to call this form submissions, and I will do UUID. That is what I would suggest for the sequential key, for the primary key in your database. Now you do the auto create. We'll turn that off. This is a very ugly thing sometimes, because sometimes you create a user database, you keep the setting on, Xano will generate a pre-made CRUD endpoint as if Supabase would do it, right? But then people that know how Xano does its naming can guess that endpoint, and then they can retrieve all your user data that should be protected. So you always want to turn this off. If you want to create a CRUD endpoint, create it within the API group, but never have the setting on. Be very careful about that. But let's add this table here, and now we can create a table. Now let's look what our app is. I have a name and an email. I just built like a simple application to show you how to do that basic connection. So we'll create a row for name. I would never do required in the database because Xano doesn't work like Supabase, where your database enforces the rules. I would not suggest that. I would enforce the rules on an API level, on the middleware level, but we'll go into that. Let's add this column, and now I need to add another column, email. So I can go in here and I can add an email column. I'll call that email, and I will add that column. There you go. And now I have my database set up. So let's duplicate this tab, and now we need to build an API. Now Xano does give us the possibility to automatically create those APIs, but I always suggest doing that within Xano's API builder. So we'll go to the API, and now we create a new API group that's like a bucket for your application. So we'll call this Nordcraft API form, and I will make this public so Nordcraft can fetch the integration. Now keep in mind, when you do it public, you want to have APIs that are authenticated and secure, otherwise everybody can easily figure out and spam your APIs, but we'll make more videos about that. So let's save this. Now we need to create an endpoint inside of this API group. Now you would go on add new API endpoint, and this is where you will build your workflows, your logic. In here, I always like to do a custom endpoint. Now what are we doing? We're doing a forms request. We have inputs that we want to send to Xano. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this data, just for illustration purposes, and it will be a post request because we're sending new data to the backend. If we're sending new data to the backend, it will be post. If we're getting existing data, it will be get with one simple exclusion, AI. If we're doing AI, it counts as generating new data, even though we're getting data back, and then we want to do a post as well. So for this, because it's a form request, we'll do a post, and we'll just leave authentication out. I do have videos on authentication though. I would highly suggest you to Google for them or YouTube for them. Let's go on save. And now we have this API builder, and now this is where Xano is different than Supabase, because we have a visual function stack to build those APIs. And the cool thing about that is it's patented, so nobody can steal it. Xano is the only one that has it. You don't have to chop around and find someone else that has something similar. There are tools that has something similar like BuildShip, but if you tried, you know it's not the same. It's not the same like Xano because it's patented. They can't have it be the same, right? So there you go. Now we want to take a look. We have name input, email input, right? So we want to build an API where we have a text input for name, and that will be required. So we will enforce those rules in our APIs, and we will add that input. And then we'll add another input for email. I will call this email, and I will make this required. So we're enforcing this on an API level. Now let's go and run, which lets us test the data. So I can do name, NoCode ProCode, email, hey@NoCodeProCode.com. Now I can run it, nothing happens. So now we need to build in the function stack our logic. Inside of here, we can now add an add record or an add or edit record. Now, because we don't want duplicates in our database, we want to do an add or edit record. And I will go to my form submissions database. And now inside of here, I'm not looking by ID, I'm looking by email. So this field name here is representing the email column in the database here. So what it will do is it will look, okay, I will take a look, the email that should come from the input here. So we'll take the input email, it will look into the database and it will say, hey, is there this email that was inputted into the API, is there any row on this column that has this value in it? If not, it will create it and add to it. And then it already mapped the name, so let's just go on input and map it with the name, right? And then we'll add it. And if not, it will just leave it out. So now we will go on save, and now we have it all set up. So now when I run this, as you can see, it was added to the database. So if I go inside of here and reload the database, we have it in here. If I run it again, and 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 we take a look at the database, now nothing changed. There's still only one record. Now, if we were to go to the submission here, right, and change the name, NoCode ProCode 1, and I will run this, you will see that there's still one record, but the name has been updated because the ID is almost treated like the email is almost treated like the primary key when we do this kind of operation in the database, which is pretty cool. So there you go. This is how we set this API up. So now how do we integrate this with Nordcraft? We want to go back to our API group. The API group represents a bucket of your application. So let's copy the base URL, and we're going back to Nordcraft, and we are going on files, and we're going on services. And we click on Xano because they have a native Xano integration. Now I will paste my base URL, and I will make this a global formula so I can change it without having to restructure all the APIs that it generates. So I will call this Xano, not Xano false. I don't know why it's saying false, but I will just call that Xano. I will check connection. If it says connection established, I will check this. And now here's the beauty. If I now go and create a new API, which is how we communicate between frontend and backend, you will see that I have my Xano service already connected, and I can now select all my API groups that are in our Xano API group. So all my APIs that are in this API group, and they are all pre-set up. So if I now select this one, you see it already has the body set up with the data that the API requires, like it does in here, right, with those inputs. So now, in order to get this set up, we need to get the name and the email inside of here so we can post it to Xano. Now, in order to get that working beautifully, what we want to do is we want to get the data that's inside of this input and store it somewhere temporarily so that we can pass that data into the API. For that, we can use variables in Nordcraft. So I'll make a name variable that'll start out as an empty string, and I'll create an email variable that will also start out as an empty string. There you go. Now I go to the input, I go on attributes, and I bind it with the name variable. And then I go to this input and bind it with the email variable. There you go. Now what I'm going to do is, if I'm going to put my name in here, NoCode Pro Code, and my email, hey@nocodeprocode.com. There you go. You will see that I have the input inside of here. Now it does look a little bit ugly because I should have styled this to be white, which I will be doing right now, which is super simple in Nordcraft. That's a beautiful thing. Also, why did this turn black again? I don't want that. There you go. So now I have the data in here in my variables. As you can see, it's right inside of here. It's right inside of here. And now I go to my API, I go to the body that Nordcraft with the native integration is already pre-structured for me. I go on name, link it with the name variable, go on email, link it with the email variable. And now when I run this request, you will see that it wasn't necessarily successful, so we will need to investigate that. So let's take a look. We have data and okay. Now, I like when things don't turn out that well because that gives us an opportunity to debug it. But now let's go to the form. We want to have it structured in a form. I will go on my form submit event. After preventing default, we will call the API. There you go. So now what you want to do, you probably want to test this in the network tab. So we go to the network tab of your browser and we will now try sending the form. We will see it comes back as an error request. There's no response coming back. So we'll take a look at what's happening here. Now, Xano makes this very simple for you to debug because you can just go to request history and we will see that there's actually no request being sent to it, which is also interesting. So let's double check what is happening here with this integration. So we have a post request. We're sending into this data API. It's a post, that's good. We have this endpoint URL, and let's see if the endpoint URL is correct. Let's put this inside of here, and we see, yes, we're getting our endpoint URL, and we can test the request from here. Let's try the request out, and let's execute it. And you will see this request will be successful from the Swagger documentation, and we will find it in our database. So the question is, why does Nordcraft not work? Now we have parameters, the headers should be fine, it's application JSON. The body is correctly mapped. We have name, we have email, that should be fine. And we have events, and let's see. Now, SSR is enabled, but APIs will only run server-side if auto-fetch is enabled. So let's try, now it is a post request, it shouldn't have server-side rendering. So let's try turning server-side rendering off. This will probably fix it. Let's try running this again. No, it still does not perform the request, which is interesting. So let's give it a new try. Let's try reloading this application inside of here, and then we'll see what happens. So let's go inside of here. We'll do hey, we'll call NoCode Pro Code, and we'll do hey at nocodeprocode.com. There you go. Let's try running this. Okay, now as you can see, it works. So the issue has been the server-side rendering because Nordcraft made the mistake assuming that it can server-side render a post request, which does not work because you can only server-side render GET requests. So you always want to watch out for those little settings. Sometimes they can be a little roadblock, but there you go. You see we're pushing the data into here. If I were to change the URL and make this at despia.com and I would submit the form, right? And I would take a look now at my database, you would see that we have a new entry right inside of here with the new user. And this is how we connect Nordcraft with Xano with the native integration. Now make sure to disable server-side rendering for your post requests. Only have it on your GET request when you're loading data, so you get server-side rendering, you get great SEO and all those kinds of things. But it's pretty simple to set up. If you have any questions, take a look at nocodeprocode.com. I have great resources on there to help you build those things faster, solve all your roadblocks, and just make progress way better with less headaches. So check that out definitely, and I can't wait to see you inside of my community at nocodeprocode.com. The link is in the video description and in the pinned comment below. And happy Xano backend building. Take care.